Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland, the podcast here at WFNY. And today I'm joined by not one host, two hosts, both of my EHC brethren, Mike Hattery and, yes, Jeff Nomina, which automatically means either this podcast spikes in the ratings or goes into the toilet, are both with me today talking Indians as we head towards steamroll. 2 weeks from today, baseball starts. But I guess before, Nomina, how... with two kids now, you got one who's newbornish. How the hell did you get time to do a podcast?
I got lucky enough that everybody kind of fell asleep at the same time.
So does that mean we have to talk like this?
Yeah, pretty much. And there might be crying in the background at some point. Somebody just swearing while changing a diaper. The normal.
Well, that's okay. We can counterbalance that with Mike kissing his cat.
She's such a dog, though. She's not a cat. She's just a lover.
Oh, my gosh. Where is this going? All right, let's talk baseball. Really, if I would have said these three players at the beginning of the year, what would your answer be? So I'm going to ask the question, say the three players, who's going to be the healthiest? Cody Anderson, Jason Kipnis, or Michael Brantley? Would your answer a month ago have been Michael Brantley, who's going to play in a game tomorrow in left field?
No, although I would think I'd be the most excited about that. For all the bad news we're getting, at least the good news is really good news.
Yeah. Mike, listen, we go through this year after year, it seems. We've got Brantley, who's apparently more healthy than we thought. At least that's what it looks like, or we're about to have one of those start and stops. But now we have Kipnis, who's now 4 or 5 weeks away, which means we need a full-time second baseman or we need some really good utility play there. And we have Anderson out for the year. What's the deal in your eyes with regards to how the Indians are handling these players? And what's the deal with Kipnis? So we hear nothing about Kipnis being injured. Then, he's kind of, maybe, and now he's might not be here opening day. Now he's out maybe a month. What are your thoughts on the handling of this? And not really with us, but what's the deal? Like, do they know more than they let on? Or is this one of those things where the players just aren't giving them full information, or perhaps they just don't have good information?
I hope they know more than they're letting on. It's bad if they don't. Yeah, this is I don't know. Commenting on these things is so hard because I think the one area where I really give teams latitude is like when you have guys with I don't know. What are we talking? We're talking about elbow and shoulder issues. I just think those are the most unpredictable. And I think when you act like you know what the root cause of a breakdown is or anything like that, or know what the sort of rehab process is going to be like, you're basically just lying. So it's hard for me to criticize them, but that's not a defense of them. It's just, it could be totally their fault. It could be completely not their fault. This could be a mess. This could just be an unfortunate reality. But, it's such a murky situation that I can't really add any insight to it other than it sucks.
Well, the plus side of this is the Indians rarely, other than a few quips here and there, perhaps from Tito, or occasionally you'll hear something from Antonetti. But I think the plus side of that is they don't ever really kind of throw, shade on the player. This could be one of those things where the player just wants to play. If you look at kind of as Kipnis, Brantley too, the way they kind of fell into this long, I guess, exit poll is that they wanted to play. Kipnis played in a couple of games where they weren't sure how bad the shoulder was. At least that's what they were saying. And he kind of, I don't know, shouldered his way into this. Jeff, is there, it's interesting. I think you're kind of the guy that kind of keeps me sane, which is insane to say out loud. But, the interesting piece to this is it's potentially possible that Kipnis is out for most of the month of April. And Brantley, while he's going to play in a game tomorrow, with as many start and stops as he's had over the past 18 months, that's no guarantee of anything. It's possible we may start the year off without two all-star players on our roster. And I'm still not while it's not great, and while the spring hasn't been the best because of these injuries, I'm not really all that worried yet. What the hell? Like, shouldn't me and Mike be like screaming at the top of our lungs at this point? I mean, we're almost there, but it seems like the front office has done a nice job counterbalancing injury.
That might be the biggest value of the Encarnacion signing. It gave us just such a cover for a lot of other things that could possibly go wrong. Even more than making us peak Indians even peakier, it covered a lot of the things that are going to happen throughout the season. And so I think it does cover some of that. And just to comment real quick on, how they kind of handle these injuries. You never, if a guy has a clean scan, there's not much you can do. You have to go by what he says. And I think that's what happened with Brantley last year. He kept telling him he was fine. And so they kept saying, okay, he's fine. But now they're kind of simultaneously playing this thing with Kipnis where they're saying if this were an important time, he could play right now, but also he's out for 5 weeks. And I don't think those kind of overlap. Like you can get away with that if it's a couple days or a week or two, but like you're not okay to play and also 5 weeks away. So, I guess 2 points there. The first is that I agree that their messaging on these injuries has not been great, and as a fan base that's been spurned on this, not just with the Indians either. I mean, this happens with the Cavs too, and the Browns have had their instances. It's odd as a city how often a minor injury turns into a major one. But the Encarnacion signing just covers so much. I mean, you can lose Brantley and Kipnis, and still this lineup is pretty, deep.
Yeah, well, and maybe and this is a good segue into this, maybe that's part of why they're able to set Kipnis. If you think about teams and then maybe not the Indians so much, but teams with depth, they're able to put players, on the DL for a while they have support. And it's a good segue into who that support is going to be. And this is going to go in some interesting directions, because when you talk about perhaps bringing some utility guys up, of course, that brings us to Michael Martinez. But is this a case where the Indians have depth in this organization for the first time in eons, where you have guys like Yandy Diaz, you have guys like Eric Gonzalez, Ronnie Rodriguez, Michael Martinez, as much as it pains me to say.
Wash your mouth out with soap after that.
Can we get a bleep button just so?
I asked bleep.
Michael Martinez is like.
Well, we had the Pete tower ringing the bells behind us, so maybe I'll just keep bleeping it out with those. But I don't know. It could just be a depth thing where we do have these youngsters, other than the old guy that we'll get to in a second. We have such we can move Jose Ramirez over. We can bring up a guy like Gio Urshela in at third base, or Yandy Diaz at third. We have guys like Eric Gonzalez and Ronnie Rodriguez, youngish guys who have some good defense. And some upside offensively. Is this just one of those cases where there's depth, and because of that depth, they can rest Kipnis in a way that they perhaps didn't have a chance to do with a guy like Brantley because they needed him back soon? Mike, start with you.
Yeah, I also think this is like kind of a reflection of the fact that the American League Central is a super garbage division. And so, like, if there was anybody who looked like a serious contender, and I know if everything breaks right for Detroit, maybe they're a serious contender, but everything breaking right when you're betting on 35-year-olds is just something that, like, it's not going to happen. And I just think this division is so weak that it allows them to be more protective of these dudes early. And the other thing is, this is such a complex conversation because, like, there is the depth where I'm like, look, we're not going to match Kipnis' production, but if you flip Ramirez over to second base, he's going to be a better defender. And then you'll have a slight downgrade at third in terms of production, but it's going to be Yandy Diaz. Like, he's going to be really productive there. Like, it's a very minimal marginal value step. Like, logically, that's what I can think. I'm like, oh, this shouldn't be a big issue. Like, we have the depth there. Unfortunately, shit happens named Terry Francona. And we get to watch, like, Michael Martinez play second base for a week, or Eric Gonzalez play second base for a week, and all of a sudden, and I really like Giovanni Urshela. Like, I'm rooting for the dude. He has, and Jim and I will argue about this, but, like, I just see no offensive upside. No matter how good a defender he is, he just hits for no power, and he can't walk. He doesn't really hit for a high batting average. He just, he doesn't have great contact authority yet. And unless they unlock that, I sort of just feel like there's a really obvious, simple, easy solution that makes this team really solid and makes the Kipnis sort of a aggressive, protective move with Kipnis pretty simple, but it feels like we're not going to make that really obvious move.
Well, I don't know about that yet. I think that sometimes players make resounding screams to get chance to play. Naquin did it last year and had the opening and was able to take advantage of it. And we do have Diaz playing well. But before I get into that, Jeff, how do you like our depth? What guys for you, before we get into some takes, what guys for you stand out? I mean, we mentioned Urshela taking over at third, moving Ramirez over to second. Obviously, Andy Diaz is an option to do the same as well. And I know that Mike wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago about Eric Gonzalez perhaps taking over that second base position. Well, actually, it was a utility piece. To be fair to Mike, it wasn't a full-time position. I think that would alter maybe his take on this. But who are you? Who are your guys? Like, how would you rank? As far as situations go, what would you rank as your best? And I guess as a segue, your worst.
I mean, with the rest of Indians Twitter, I heart Yandy. So, I would be all for him taking over third base. I'm not as down on Eric Gonzalez playing second if it's a week or two. I don't think he's anything special or great, but if you're looking for, solid defense, a guy who's not going to hurt you, I think he can sit there on the field and not hurt you. And I think that would be fine. But I think what's interesting about the Indians too, and a reason that they're able to kind of play the long game with somebody like Kipnis is it's not just the short-term depth in Diaz and Gonzalez and Martinez and all those guys, but the long-term depth coming up. We've seen, Bradley Zimmer tearing it up. We know Greg Allen's kind of on his way. So there's these kind of impact prospects that we're likely going to see at least one, if not both of those guys this year. So even if the front half of the year here, we have to give guys an extra little break, to get to full health, there's a pretty decent chance that we're going to be calling up some of our, big guns from the minors here mid-season or late season to help out. Just to illustrate the kind of depth we have, we spent the entire offseason complaining about the guy who finished third in Rookie of the Year and a top 30 prospect. Our biggest problems were those two guys all offseason. We just bitched and moaned about Naquin's defense or Zimmer's K rate, those are small issues but in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about some, pretty damn good players that we're going to be calling up. So I think we have the depth on the short term to just literally stand on the field at second base or third base, whatever we need to do. But long term, we also have the prospects and guys like Diaz and Zimmer and Allen that are coming up that are going to be cornerstones of this team for the next 5 years. So we have a pretty huge margin for error, even if the beginning of this year starts a little slow.
Can we consider like an alternative proposition?
Nope.
Yes. No.
So this is my question. Like, can both Yandy, like, just for fun, and everybody's gonna be like, the Indians don't care about Super 2, blah blah blah. Yeah, I know what Super 2 is, you pricks. Okay, I understand Super 2. Whoever wants to comment that on every article ever, everybody understands Super 2 now. It's not 2003. Anyway, what if you call up Zimmer? Chisenhall plays a little third base. We get a little flexible Chisenhall. Ramirez starts at second. You call up Yandy too. You platoon Chiz and Yandy at third base, and also platoon Yandy and Zimmer in right field.
Well, okay, so why? So all of a sudden, Yandy's a bad defender, and they don't want to put him at third because they want to try him out in outfield. But they're playing him at third, right? So why would that would make some sense, Mike? Right? I mean, because Chisenhall, I don't know, he's played his whole career at third base, other than 18 months. So that seems to be an option. It's not even on the table, though. So if they're willing to put Carlos Santana at third base, and I forget which one of you went off on this. I think it was Jeff, which will be a good lead-in for Jeff. If they're willing to try freaking Carlos Santana at third base, and he played it in like low A, or maybe it was even, fall ball somewhere, minor league camp somewhere long before he even became a catcher. If they're willing to try Carlos Santana, I think wouldn't that option make sense? You put Chisenhall, who's not a great defender at third base, but I don't know. He can play third, and it gives them roster. It gives them maneuverability with their roster. Probably the hang up there, Mike, is Zimmer. But they do have other options in the outfield that they could bring up as well. You've got the Almonte, Austin Jackson thing, but I don't know, Jeff. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, our boy Chiz, now we're going to make him a super utility guy.
Yeah, first off, if we're trying to make Chiz, versatile, I think we could just leave him in spring training, let him man that whole area, and then we come back to Cleveland and let the roster play out.
Well, he's been playing a lot of center. Could we just let him stay in center, like in Arizona, and say here and like throw him like cat treats?
If he's good at the center of things, let's just leave him in the middle of nowhere, and we'll be fine.
I love this.
I agree with you. It's funny how selectively they care about defense. We've seen Chris Johnson and Carlos Santana play third base. We spent all of last year with Rajay and Naquin Manning center field with Almonte in left field. I'm not pretending like Almonte is some spectacular center fielder, but like metrics have pretty consistently shown, albeit in not a huge sample, that he's at least passable in center field.
And let's not forget that they have played Mike Aviles at third base, not all that great, and put him in the outfield. Let's not forget that Michael Martinez has played third base.
Field defensive replacement in a World Series game.
Exactly.
It's maddening how defense comes and goes as a concern for the team. And did Yandy win? Was he voted by the coaches in both AA and AAA or just AA?
High A Carolina League and Double A, and probably the only reason why he wasn't mentioned as a third base guy at AAA is because he played so much outfield. To be fair,
and can I jump in here? Clay Davenport, who does awesome like DRS projection numbers for minor leagues, had Diaz basically as plus in right field in his time in Columbus. Really good data.
Well, in the count, and they're saying that, he's learning the outfield position, but I don't know, like Eric Gonzalez, his sample size out there isn't great, nor is Jose Ramirez's, by the way. As a matter of fact, Diaz has played more in the outfield than Jose Ramirez in his career. Just saying. Okay, back to you, Jeff. Sorry, the
selective defense thing bothers me, and so if there's another reason for it, if it's Super 2 or whatever, then you know what, they have to make up some other excuse, and I get it. It's hard to believe that they're really concerned about his like age 32 season or whatever that they'd be getting by holding him back. Especially when there's a need right now and you could send him right back down without any trouble. They've done that. But it's just the language they use for these things is frustrating as a fan because you want to kind of understand the philosophy of your team. And the philosophy of this team the last couple of years hasn't really been focused on defense much, even as we've kind of lucked into some pretty decent defensive teams after Chisenhall moved to right field. I can't even believe I just said that. We've lucked into some pretty good defensive teams, but it just doesn't seem to have been much of a priority. So now for it to all of a sudden be holding back a guy who is very clearly ready, who spent forever in AA and they left on the roster in AAA when he very obviously should have been a call-up last September, and watch Michael Martinez take the final at bat in a Game 7 extra innings World Series game instead of him. At some point that guy probably just deserves a chance.
So you mentioned Michael Martinez, and I guess one of the hot takes kind of going around the internet over the past few days, and one that popped up again today, is his hot defense, and that there was even a comp somewhere about Jose Ramirez and Michael Martinez perhaps being on the same playing field. I'm going to send this over to Mike because I'm trying to not raise my voice and use a monotone voice here so as not to give away my true thoughts. And I know we EHC guys on occasion get kind of, bashed is not the right word. We should be praised, damn it, for not liking Michael Martinez because he's just not good. But Mike, I'm thinking Michael Martinez could be the 2017 version of Jose Ramirez. How freaking hot take is that?
It's impressive.
That's not my hot take, by the way, but that was a hot take I saw steamrolling through Twitter today.
I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is I think this reflects a larger problem wherein we sort of, whenever a player is like rostered by a team consistently and played consistently or prioritized, and we don't like their offensive profile that much, like everybody starts talking about how they're a good defender. It's sort of like what happened with Naquin when the Indians were sort of priming for him playing center field before last season. They just didn't see the offensive breakout, I think, that he put up. And so a lot of the messaging was, we really like his defense and center field, blah, blah, blah. So now we really have no legitimate explanation for why one of the 5 worst offensive players in Major League Baseball history might make this team. So it's important that everybody discusses defense. And I just sort of think, if you're going to keep a guy just for defense and something, it should be sort of like otherworldly. Like it should be like Andrelton Simmons, except he can only hit 210. Except the problem is that, I don't know. Michael Martinez isn't that guy. He's like an average defender at short. He's an average defender in the outfield, or maybe a little below average. He's an average defender at third. He's an average defender at second. Maybe, I guess he's a little bit above average at second, but, he's not a special defender. We talk about his defense because that's the only thing he can do competently. And people are... Jeff, why don't you talk about it?
Well, let me ask you this. You guys follow the minors quite, a bit more than myself. Is he a significantly better defender than someone like Eric Gonzalez?
No. I mean, and Mike and I are not. I mean, so the fact that Mike wrote a piece on Eric Gonzalez being the guy as our utility guy says a lot about kind of the anti-Martinez profile, because Mike and I are not Eric Gonzalez fans. I mean, and by that I mean there's been a lot of kind of that same thing with regards to Gonzalez as a great defender. He's a decent defender. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you can talk about Michael Martinez being, we've got people saying he's a great defender. Sure, if you're comparing him to Aviles, yes, he's a great defender. It's kind of like Almonte being a great center fielder when you're comparing him to Michael Bourne, but he's probably average to a little bit better than average, maybe a little better than that. I don't know. We still have to see him over the span of a year. Eric Gonzalez is a good defender. I mean, as much as I want to rip on Eric Gonzalez, he can defend, and he's pretty decent at it. His problem is his best defensive position is shortstop. I'm not saying he can't move that over to second base, but, and does he profile a little bit better offensively than Michael Martinez? Sure, but all 3 of us do that too. So, I mean, Mike, I'll let you take it from here because you've become the calm guy for Eric Gonzalez. But I mean, I'm no fan of Eric Gonzalez, but he would be 7 shades better defensively anywhere that he plays than Michael Martinez, in my opinion.
And even if you concede that they're like the same defensive player, like if you go that far, there's like a pretty high likelihood that Eric Gonzalez is going to have like a 30-point advantage in weighted runs created plus over Michael Martinez, or maybe even let's say 10 or 15 or 20. Like that's a huge gap offensively. I don't understand how people can look at someone who has over 500 plate appearances and is basically 70% below league average offensively and say, oh yeah, 25th guy, let's work on his bunting skills. It is unfathomable. And this media environment, Terry Francona has the best damn job in the world, and he's a fantastic manager, but he is unquestioned. He's never hit. I have never seen someone manage a Game 7 so poorly and not have a single hometown writer of any merit criticize anything he did in that game. And you can praise his whole resume, but these shenanigans with players like Michael Martinez are just the inexcusable garbage that has to sort of be forced out of his hand.
Well, and I mean, his management of the playoffs overall, I mean, that's under umbrella of invincibility.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but when a town, or at least some people in the town, see Michael Martinez go into the game in the 9th inning and all go, good Lord, I hope he doesn't make the last out. And he makes the last freaking out. That's not good. That's not freaking good. And people can blame the rain all they want to. And maybe the rain had something to do with it. But Michael Martinez being I don't know. Okay. I need to move away from this. I think anybody who makes at the end of the day, if Michael Martinez makes this roster, we can have that podcast, and I've promised that podcast. I just don't believe if you talk about 40-man roster, he's not on it. And if they put him on the 40-man roster ahead of a guy like Andy Diaz, that's going to be one hell of a podcast. That might have to be me by myself ranting. All right, Andy Diaz. So he's sitting right now 8 for 21. He's walked 6 times. He struck out 3 times. The guy is an on-base machine. Mike has been all over the contact piece all spring. This is a guy who eats, sleeps, and drinks contact. If you have eyeballs, you can notate that he's put on some muscle, at least since high A. When I stood next to him in high A, I mean, he was bigger than me. I'm no specimen by any stretch. He was bigger than me, but it's not like you would have said, wow. Now you say, wow. I mean, he's clearly trying to add power, which fits a corner outfield position. They're playing him at third base, so obviously they have an intention of perhaps using him there down the stretch during the spring. And they started doing that long before the Kipnis injury. That's for another day, talking about when they knew about the injury and how bad it was. But they talk about they want him in the outfield, but it's obvious they're prepping him for utility. I guess the flack for that, Jeff, is that people want Yandy to be beneficial to this club over the long term. So they want the 26-year-old to go to Columbus so he can get every day at bats. This guy who's a contact specialist, who's hit everywhere, who walks all the time. Not only does he make contact, but he counters that with this fantastic Carlos Santana-like eye at the plate. Better than Carlos because generally walks more than he strikes out. To me, seems like a guy who profiles in the utility role because he's going to get on base. He's going to get hits. That's just what he does. And defensively, there hasn't been a manager ever, other than Terry Francona, and this is whatever you want to think about it, that says he's not a good defender. So, what the hell is the problem with Yandy Diaz just getting the utility job, especially now that it's going to be a regular thing for at least 3 to 4 weeks? I mean, is this a no-brainer? You put him in at second base, you put him in at third base, you move Jose Ramirez over to second, and then when these guys come back, you use him as a utility guy, four games at least a week, as Mike and I have already said. Jeff, what are your thoughts? I mean, it seems ridiculous that we're even talking about this, and I know I sound like an idiot because I talk about it all the time, but I talk about it all the time because it seems senseless not to do it.
Well, can I also point out that we talk about it all the time because the team's so stacked, and as fans, you have to have interesting storylines, and this is literally the only interesting storyline because the team is just so damn good that we're really mad about a utility infielder. It's awesome. It's
this is a great conversation to have.
It's just the best, right? Like we all kind of know how awesome this is. But yeah, and like to my point earlier, I think he spent like 150 games in AA. Like I said, he sat in AAA when they obviously needed a versatile guy who could play infield and outfield to come up and play in the playoffs, and he had to sit there and watch Michael Martinez, come in World Series games. Now, the story changed from we want him to get him every day at bats to his defense stinks. Like, at what point should he start taking this a little bit personally and kind of be fed up with kind of the narrative the team's shaping about him? Like, at what point is he kind of like, hey, I want to come up and kick some ass. I've hulked out on muscles. What more can he do at this point? And they just keep finding excuses to send him back. And so I think it kind of sends the wrong message. And, the message is either that he needs to play every day. Now that he can play every day, his defense stinks. What's the other argument? That Michael Martinez is veteran leadership? How bad is that locker room that needs veteran leadership? They made it to Game 7 last year. There should be plenty of veterans in that. So in what
goddamn locker room does Michael Martinez have veteran leadership credentials?
Right. None, absolutely none. A lot of minor league locker rooms. Sorry.
So at some point, it's got to be pretty insulting to him, and it this does kind of lead us to look more at that it is a service time play because their excuses are all fairly clearly bullshit, and that's fine. But I don't understand the idea behind bring him up to start the beginning of the year. He can play every day, and you can send him back down when Kipnis is healthy, and nobody's going to say he should have stayed here over Kipnis. Like nobody was going to say that. So what's the harm even in that? Yeah, I think they're just trying a little too hard on this one and trying to get a little too cute. You've got a guy who fills the exact hole that you have. Go use him.
Mike, I mean, you're gonna be our last thought on this. We've been on, the three of us really been on the Yandy train for a long time. You and I have seen him in the minor league coverage that we've done over the years, and this seems like a no-brainer to me. I mean, when you talk Super 2 with Bradley Zimmer, that's one thing, and while it's kind of funny to talk about with Zimmer, it's even more funny to talk about with a guy like Yandy Diaz. who they're handling not like a guy that they're worried about Super 2. They're handling him like they're not worried about him at all in any stretch of the imagination. So this can't be a Super 2 thing because he's too old for that. And, I mean, what are we missing here? I mean, do they legitimately think that Yandy Diaz is a quad A guy that's never going to make it? Or are they really prepping him long-term to be the guy that replaces Michael Brantley, since this does look like it could be final year with the Indians, depending on, I mean, they have that option. It's possible. I mean, it's doubtful at this point that they'll pick it up depending on what he does this year. But I mean, is that even sensible that they're prepping him to be the long-term replacement and left? I mean, that can be the only reason, right? We don't want to bring him up and screw him up as a utility guy so that he can ultimately be the full-time left fielder, which saying it out loud sounds absolutely, we're talking about grown men playing Major League Baseball. Like, you can't move from right to left and go, oh, I can do this. Or I don't know, from third to left. I don't know. It seems like something that big league people can do. And like I said, like Jeff told me the other day to make me feel at least somewhat sane, they did it with Carlos Santana to third base. I mean, come on. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a question there somewhere. Yeah, I mean, left field in Cleveland's incredibly easy to play too. You have a huge friggin' wall in left field that's shallow. Like, I don't know what the problem is. It's not like he's gonna get lost out there. It's not very big. With Yandy, there is not going to be a night where you can convince me, at least against left-handed pitching, that he isn't one of the 6 best hitters against left-handed pitching in the Indians lineup. Maybe 7. And so letting that guy hang out in AAA and beat up a bunch of dudes who are throwing 91 and can't control the strike zone while he gets a few more reps at third base or left field is just, it's really not worth my time. Come back with something that's, a good take. But, 4 or 5 times a week is fine. That's fine. He's super versatile. And I'll tell you, like, when I talked to Dave Wallace, he emphasized like 3 times how athletic Yandy Diaz is, and I don't think that was unintentional. Like, there are passive remarks, and there are intentional remarks, and I think one of the things is I think the Francona smoke about defense isn't really a thing. I think it's just smoke. I don't get the purpose of the smoke, but it's absurd, and he's ready to go. I've never seen, and I think, and I want to have this conversation too, because I know that we sort of are in this, like, this, I don't know, we're in a funnel of love for Yandy Diaz, and it sounds like we're like talking about him as a next MVP candidate, which I'm really not, but I know his floor is really freaking good. He's super versatile. He makes a ton of contact. He gets on base, and he crushes left-handed pitching. He's just has a great floor, and that's why I buy him.
I'm just so happy I'm in the funnel of love with you guys right now.
Well, we now have our title for the podcast, and if that doesn't guarantee 1,000 listens, I don't know what will. All right, we'll wrap things up, I guess.
Funnel of love.
with one final thought, I do want to talk about Cody Anderson, and just real quick, just thoughts on Cody Anderson being out and what this means. It probably doesn't mean a whole lot on the surface, but I think the one worry that I do have is rotation depth, especially with the problems we had late in the year last year. And just one quick thought on Cody Anderson being out for the year, and are you worried about the rotation, Mike?
Well, we have Carrasco, who's sore, and our 6 starters, Clevenger, who can't command the strike zone, and the second best depth option starter was Cody Anderson, so it's pretty crappy.
It's good we're ending on a fun topic. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. Now, you have to kind of convince yourself that they're magicians and say that Kluber wasn't really supposed to be a super duper stud, and Carrasco bounced around. They finally turned him into something pretty incredible, and they've done this. They've turned not great into great before. So maybe there's a lot of guys in Columbus that could be that guy, and maybe they do that.
And they do have a fun Columbus rotation. All right, we're going to close up shop there. Make sure you check out the coverage at WFNY in our Indians preview. We've got a piece coming out tomorrow via me about the Indians rotation, that very thing. Cody Anderson is my lead-in for that. It's fun. Again, Jeff, it's fun when we're talking about like the 8th or 9th guy in the conversation as opposed to the 1st or 2nd guy. But we've got a Let's Argue coming out on Tuesday. Anything you guys want to push and plug other than baby diapers?
Yeah, that's the only thing I've been pushing or plugging.
Let's Argue topic, Mike.
I got nothing. Jeff and I have to talk.
It'll be good, like always.
That's all you need to know is it's going to be good.
You should read it so you can be one of the few and the proud.
Yeah.
It consistently gets like 80. I mean, we get nice conversation in that. So there's that. All right, we'll close it up there. Jeff joins us. I don't know how often this is going to happen over the next season, but we'll take it when we can get it. It's the funnel of love. All right, have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.